The game I'm analyzing is Plaguing Evolved. Plaguing Evolved is a strategy game in which players create and evolve a pathogen to infect the world. The challenge for the players is to wipe out all humanity before a cure is found. While Plague was not specifically designed as an educational game, it poses a lot of potential to become one. Two main things that I think player can get from this game are knowledge about geography and disease infection. In order to gain this knowledge, players should first be familiar with the world map and names of the country. Players should also have a general idea about diseases, how it can have symptoms and be identified through them, and that some diseases can spread. Through the game, players can learn about the characteristics of each country. Plague includes a country screen that contains more detail about the country, where it is on the map, what the climate is like, and what the socioeconomic status is like. The screen also lists the country's access point, whether it can be reached by land, air, and/or sea. In this regard, most of the information in Plague is modeled after the real world. Therefore, players can have the chance to learn about these facts. Outside of the game, it could help players point out countries in the map and notice which country has what climate. In the disease screen, players can see details about their pathogen and how they can evolve it. From the available options, player will learn the ways diseases can transmit and where that kind of transmission would be most effective. For example, transmission by insect would work best in hot countries. Also in this screen, players can learn that diseases can develop drug resistance, cold resistance, and even have genetic reshuffling. Outside of the game, this will transfer as awareness of health issues in general. For example, parents have reported that their kids become more diligent in hand washing after playing the game. CDC has also noticed the game as a way to raise awareness about epidemiology and disease transmission. The mechanics of Plaguing Evolved can be simplified into 3 steps. Pick a pathogen, burst bubbles to collect DNA points, and evolve your disease with those points. Players start by picking the type of pathogen they want to use, either bacteria, virus, fungus, etc. Each type will then have different abilities they can evolve. For example, if you use fungus, you can have spore bursts that let your disease infect random places in the world. Players then name their disease and pick a starting place. They can evolve their disease using DNA points, which they get by popping bubbles. Bubbles show up every time players manage to infect a new country, as well as randomly throughout the game. Other than the normal gameplay mode, Plague also has a scenario mode, in which players start with a partially developed strains of real-life diseases such as the Black Death, or in a completely different version of the world, such as in the Ice Age scenario. The newest mutation of Plaguing Evolved also includes a multiplayer mode in which players go on a one-on-one race to conquer the world with their disease. The different modes, along with the game's difficulty settings, introduce many different dynamics that players can experience, which helps make the higher replayability of this game. The main aesthetics of Plaguing Evolved is the challenge. Players need to come up with a strategy to make sure their disease spread, challenged by the condition of the countries they're trying to infect and the rate at which the cure is being developed. Plague also presents the fantasy aesthetics, giving the players a taste of being a criminal mastermind who's trying to kill the world with a disease. The scenario mode offers custom scenario where players can create their own scenario, which is a form of expression. Lastly, the newly introduced multiplayer mode appeals to the fellowship, or rather competition aesthetics. From an educational point of view, this game supports some learning principles. The first one is personalization, which it offers by letting the players name their disease and more massively through the custom scenario mode. The game also incorporates variability and multiple route principles, in which players can evolve their disease differently and see the different outcomes. From James G's principle, this game also applies the psychosocial moratorium, in which learners can take risks in a space where real-world consequences are lowered. There are some learning principles that the game could, but does not support. The most important one is feedback. The game does not have an immediately observable effect every time the disease is evolved. Players can see the effect later on in the game, but they have to make the connection themselves, as the game never explicitly say. For example, you managed to infect South Africa because you increased air transmission. The game would also benefit from adding guided attention, because right now the clues are hidden within paragraphs. Metacognition would also be a good principle to incorporate into the game. The first mechanics modification I propose is the I bet mode. In this modification, every time players evolve their disease, they get the chance to guess which country will be infected next. If they guess correctly, they will get bonus DNA points. This idea came up as I was trying to find a way to make players more interested in making informed decisions. This modification adds a layer of challenge for the players, especially if we modify it even further and make them bet DNA points on countries they are sure will be infected next. With this modification, players should also be incentivized to pay more attention to what they evolve, as well as each country's characteristics. This would make the gameplay a little slower, as players would want to make well-informed decisions. This modification highlights the guided attention and feedback principle. To better support the feedback principle, there should also be a pop-up of explanation when the next country is infected. The second modification for the mechanic is the Redesign Criminal Mastermind mode. Realistically speaking, when you're a crazy scientist evolving pathogen to kill humanity, you yourself would have to be somewhere in the world. This was how the idea came about. In this modification, players also have to choose where they want to live and stay healthy as they evolve their disease. There will be an additional self-screen which shows the player's health and condition and various actions they can do to avoid getting infected by their own pathogen. This will add challenge for the player, as they have to maintain their health about certain threshold while making sure the whole world dies. It would make them feel conflicted about making the disease too lethal, because they have to think about their own safety as well. In terms of learning objectives, this modification tries to more explicitly educate players about ways to avoid diseases. This supports even more personalization principle, as well as adding some metacognition. By being in the world they're infecting, players should be more self-conscious about the damage they're making every time they evolve the disease, thus helping them to learn deeper. This has been fun, thanks for watching!